Hellfire is the third album released by UK experimental rock / post-punk band Black Midi. I was a bit skeptical coming into this album because Eat was a little bit disappointing for me, and Welcome to Hell I just didn't find myself coming back to that often. But after hearing these singles in the context of the album, I was wrong. I definitely would classify this album as a concept album, as each track kind of features a different person, or sometimes the same person, who has done something so terrible that they are eventually sentenced to hell. And the album doesn't waste any time throwing us into the chaos or
into hell.
Hellfire kicks it off with some dissonant drones, some sharp stabs of sax, keys, guitar chords, and some really interesting marching kind of drums as well. And the lyrics let us know exactly what we're about to be in for with this album. It's a very pessimistic view at just life in general. Everything sucks, it's all shit, kind of stuff like that. This is definitely someone who's kind of stuck in the endless cycle of misery that life can often feel like. And it's definitely a fitting intro into an album that is just full of unpleasant topics and unpleasant ideas. This track then transitions into Sugar / Zoo, which opens up with some really serene and beautiful sax runs. Eventually these, though, abruptly cut into a buzzing guitar riff that is absolutely insane. The speed on the riff is insane, and I feel like this guitar riff kind of does a really good job of depicting with sound a scuffle or a fight, which this song is obviously about. The track takes place in a dystopian future. It says 2163 is the year. It tells the story of a man who kills Sugar, a wrestler, for attention. He justifies killing by stating that Sun Sugar will only be remembered because of this killing. And near the end of the song, there's a moment where it's portrayed that the audience actually enjoys the killing and gets some sort of entertainment value out of it because it's more than what they paid for, which is kind of a theme also running throughout the album. There's a couple tracks where the audience is portrayed kind of just as bad as the people doing these terrible things. Overall, it's the first moment of great storytelling that is really present throughout this entire album. The next track, Eat Men Eat, which again, I didn't love as a single at first, but it's grown on me like crazy. It's one of my favorites on the album now. It's about two men stumbling upon a mining facility where they're going to be drained of their stomach acid to produce a blood red wine, which these people are eventually going to sell. And the main reason I used to hate this track was mainly because of Cameron's vocals on it. I thought the out of tune kind of singing at parts kind of just took me out of it. But as I listen to it more, I think it actually really draws me into the track and the story even more. Overall, the lack of intonation and just the wild kind of lack of caring with the vocals kind of adds to the absurdity of the story, in my opinion. Overall, it's one of my favorite tracks, instrumentally, definitely, and it's got a great story to it as well. It ends with some wailing, swans-esque kind of horns that are really entertaining as well. It's just a really absurd track, and it's another great story within this album about a man being sentenced to hell. Now, the next track, Welcome to Hell, is easily my favorite on this album. I think it's a perfect 10 out of 10 track. It starts off with probably the catchiest guitar riff on the album. It's absolutely insane. I've had this riff probably stuck in my head for 3 days now since the album dropped. The drums are absolutely insane on this track. Morgan kills it. There's one moment where everything cuts out except the drums, and it's just a joy to listen to because the rhythm and just everything going on with the drums are so entertaining. There's also a couple sections after verse 2 and verse 4 where the sound really fills out. There's horns and strings that come in. That's just absolute ear candy. Like, it's probably some of my favorite moments on this record in terms of the sound. It's just, again, super satisfying, a joy to listen to. This track also does a great job of like playing with tempo, slowing down, speeding up, sudden changes in tempo and time signatures, to really make you feel like you're kind of losing your mind. It adds to the really chaotic feeling, and it again makes me feel anxious, on edge, and again, just like I feel like I'm losing my mind towards the end of the track. Lyrically, this track tells the story of Tristan Bongo, a man in the military who is dealing with PTSD. Bongo's commander kind of belittles him for his mental struggles and eventually discharges him, obviously. I mean, they don't explicitly say who's the person sentenced to hell, but you have to imagine it's obviously the commander for doing terrible things to Tristan Bongo. But it's kind of interesting because they carry Bongo's story further, where he is actually the man being sentenced to hell in a later track as well. So you can kind of see the effect the commander had on him and how it kind of drove him insane. Next up, we get a pretty chill and kind of cool down moment on the track list here. After 4 really intense tracks to start the album off, we get Still. Now, the lyrics on this one are definitely the most cryptic on the album. They're the least straightforward. Cameron seems to be singing about longing for love, maybe a heartbreak. And I can only imagine the person that broke his heart maybe is the person in the wrong here, the person that's being sentenced to hell. I mean, I haven't seen explicitly the guys say anywhere that every track is about someone who's been sentenced to hell, but if we're going with that theme, you can kind of pick apart this one and imagine that that's the person who's going to be going down under, you know? I guess that's Australia. That's not hell, but you know what I mean. Cameron's singing is also quite sweet on this track. It's a lot more in tune than the singing on Eat Men Eat, which I've stated now has grown on me, and I think it actually works. But technically, his singing is a lot better on this track. I love the kind of folky feel of this track too. It feels pretty different musically and aesthetically than a lot of this album. There's a beautiful outro. I do think it runs on a little bit too long and comes a little bit boring towards the end, but it's pretty beautiful. It's got some strings, ambience, birds chirping. It feels serene, mystical, and still, as the title of the track suggests, obviously. Overall, it's probably one of my least favorite on the album. I think, again, the outro runs a little bit long, and I'm not sure if they necessarily needed a cool down moment. Personally, for me, I don't feel like I needed a cool down moment, but obviously, if the first 4 tracks were too intense for you, it is a nice kind of serene moment to kind of catch your breath. The next track here, Halftime, kind of serves as like an interlude or a literal halftime kind of intermission. It takes place at the pretty much, I feel like, the exact middle point of the album. It is revealed that I guess we're listening to this album in hell, I guess, because this is a radio station. They suggest that it's in hell, so that's kind of a cool spin to put on the album. I mean, we've had a couple of albums doing that this year with radio stations as kind of a concept of the album, obviously with Dawn FM by The Weeknd as well. So kind of an interesting moment to put in there. It's not like, I don't feel like it's absolutely necessary, but it is kind of a nice little skit, I guess, interlude, whatever you want to call it. The next track, The Race Is About to Begin, was probably my favorite track on a first listen. It has shrunk on me a little bit. I don't love it as much now. I think it's still really good though. Lyrically, the track picks up back with Tristan Bongo from Welcome to Hell, obviously. It takes place after his time in the military, and it's revealed that he's been betting on horses and kind of losing himself in a gambling addiction. At one point in this track, Jordy goes full rap god with like a 2-minute long verse, just rapping insanely fast. It's from Bongo's point of view, and it kind of illustrates the fact that he's kind of losing his mind and losing himself in this addiction. I mean, you just look at this like chunk of lyrics here, or to fly forever in between ends, or in between in-betweens, or in between no between, or no nothing, no savior, no journey, no end, 1,000 years of no nothing, hiding from nothing. Like, it's a lot of the same repeated words, and it again kind of brings this rambling kind of feel to it, someone losing their mind. And eventually at the end of the track, Bongo eventually justifies his gambling addiction with this kind of chunk of lyrics here of comparisons. The clown can be a martyr, the whore can be an angel, the hack becomes a master, the crass becomes divine. With this, he's kind of suggesting that it's impossible not to give into one's own vices. So he's kind of suggesting that there's not even really a point of trying to avoid that. Again, it's a really like pessimistic view, I feel like, which makes sense because all these people are going to hell and they're experiencing terrible things. But this album's really dark. Like, it doesn't really feel super dark on a first listen, but once you realize what these people are feeling and just their worldviews and their point of views, it's really depressing. Jordy kind of delivers this final verse as well in like a really melancholy and sad way. I feel like it kind of expresses the deep sadness Bongo is probably feeling under this kind of facade of justifying his wrongdoing. Is like, obviously he in these lyrics he's saying there's nothing wrong with it, there's no point in trying, but I feel like there's a deep sad undertone, because deep down, you know, he probably believes that he could have done better, and he knows that he did the wrong thing, obviously. This track then flows into Dangerous Liaison, I think is how you pronounce it. It flows pretty perfectly as well into this track, which is another thing that's really impressive about this album. I think Black Midi's always been pretty good with flow, pacing, transitions within their albums. I think they were especially good at that on Cavalcade, not so much on Schlagenheim. But I think they've taken that kind of to the next level with this album here. I think the pacing is amazing. Transition, just the flow of it in general is really satisfying and really well thought out. Lyrically, the song is about a farmer who's roped into kind of committing a murder by this guy who says he's going to pay him for killing this person, obviously. But there's an interesting kind of spin put on this. It's not just a dude killing someone, Obviously, this man was a farmer, so he kind of compares it to killing a pig, of course. He realizes that killing this person is a lot more disturbing than he thought it was going to be. And he kind of expresses that with this line where he says, "I'll tell you for free, it wasn't like a pig squeal," which again is just a really nice perspective to have on that and a different way to tell this kind of story and add some depth to it. Eventually, the man that paid this farmer to kill this person reveals himself as Satan, and obviously the farmer's going to be sentenced to hell because he murdered someone. To me, though, I kind of feel like this suggests that maybe there was actually no man that was going to pay this farmer to kill someone. I feel like maybe he just murdered someone, maybe had some mental illness problems, and he kind of came up with this imaginary man in his mind to kind of justify his killing and kind of just push away, I guess, the hard truth. The instrumental kind of picks up intensity towards the end, gets really fast, really intense, really chaotic, as obviously Satan reveals himself, and the farmer kind of finally fully realizes what he's actually done. The defense is definitely one of the more sweeter moments on this album. It's one of the least kind of chaotic moments, definitely, but it's definitely one of my favorite tracks. I think the instrumental palette of this track is absolutely beautiful. The flashy instrumental and the flashy vocal delivery by Greep kind of matches this kind of nightlife lifestyle of the hellbound pimp we have being portrayed in the lyrics here. The track starts off with some really sweet, plucky guitars, a smooth bass line, and some shakers. This eventually leads into just a luxurious chorus full of horns, keys, strings, and it's really, I think, the only chorus on the album, which is kind of interesting. A lot of these tracks feel pretty linear in terms of their songwriting and lyrics, so this is, I think, the only chorus, which again is interesting, but I don't think this album lacks in any way because of that. I think it's just the nature of the storytelling where it doesn't really serve itself to choruses that well. Of course, the one chorus that they do give us, though, is absolutely beautiful. Like I said, just the instrumental perfectly matches this grand, almost Broadway-esque feel of this nightlife kind of imagery we got going on here in the lyrics. I also think the instrumental does a really good job of kind of depicting the naive nature of this guy as well. Obviously, he thinks all of these girls are going to be the ones going to hell, but in reality, I mean, maybe they are too, but in reality, he's going to be the one going to hell. It's kind of funny to hear this story of this man being told as well, of this guy that's just super self-absorbed and not in any normal mindset at all. He's just completely removed from reality. So it's a really satisfying moment on the record. Definitely one of my favorites instrumentally, and it's not so complex that I could actually see myself listening to it casually as well, which is something that I've kind of struggled with Black Midi. It's not like a super big gripe that I have, but if you do want to listen to something casually, it's kind of hard to with this band. It always seems that you have to like give your full attention, which means it's good music, but this one is definitely a more versatile track, I guess, because you can listen to it casually, but you can also listen to it with your full attention as well, which is what makes it really great. So The Defense, definitely one of my favorites on this album. And then we finish it off with 27 Questions, which is a pretty solid ending to this chaotic album. It tells the story of a man who's close to death, and while seemingly losing his mind, he delivers his final will on stage. After he delivers this will in a really manic and kind of losing his mind way, which is another kind of theme of this album. I feel like people just losing their shit. So after he delivers this will, he obviously dies, is sentenced to hell. This is another moment where the audience kind of lacks compassion and doesn't really care about the fact that this guy just died. Like, they kind of just leave like nothing happened. It's definitely one of the most difficult listens musically on the album in terms of what we have happening instrumentally. The first like 75% of the track is really chaotic and again, just really a tough listen, but it's really rewarding once you get through it. The outro is kind of a really theatrical sounding piece where Jordy kind of goes into this singing kind of flow here where he tries to list off 27 questions, but he only gets 26 questions out. He abruptly dies and he doesn't finish his 27 questions, which does leave me really unsatisfied and unsettled, but I think it's a really fitting out or ending to this album because I think that's the whole point of this album. It's not supposed to be satisfying. It's not supposed to make sense. You know, it's supposed to be unsettling. It's supposed to be confusing. It's supposed to be manic, chaotic, because that's what hell is. You know, if you're dying and you're going to hell, it's not going to make sense. You're going to be confused. You're going to be scared. So I think the ending is perfect because it kind of wraps it all up. I mean, every track kind of feels like it ends in a manic kind of way like that, but I think this one really does it the best and kind of puts a nice kind of bow tie on the entire listening experience. The ending doesn't offer like any grand conclusion or lesson, but I don't think it needs to. I mean, if you're going to hell, I mean, I guess your lesson is that you messed up, you did some messed up stuff, but there's not like a silver lining to it, I feel like, and I think this album conveys that really well. So that's it for the track list. I really only have one complaint for this album, and it's the fact that it felt a little bit predictable at times. Now, when I first started listening to Black Midi, predictable would be the last word that would come to my mind, but I feel like we're 3 albums in. They've definitely changed up their sound, but they haven't changed it up like super drastically, so I think at this point, the kind of herky-jerky, slow, then fast, chaotic, then beautiful nature of their songs is becoming a little bit predictable. So that's really my only gripe. I mean, it's kind of a nitpick, so they definitely may need to kind of switch up their sound in the future, which I think they will, because they're great artists, and I think they appreciate evolving their art and kind of changing as artists. Other than that, this is a fantastic album all the way through. It's definitely the most replay value I've had with a Black Midi album. I've just continued to find myself coming back to this and kind of enjoying it even more every single time. I've probably listened to it like 8 times by now, which is kind of insane, but there's little things you can pick up on every listen, and it just makes it super enjoyable and super high in replay value. It might not be as musically complex as Cavalcade or even Schlegenheim, in my opinion, but I do think that it is the most entertaining musically. I think they found a way to balance the complex, really technical sides of their music with the really beautiful and really well thought out and really gorgeous moments of their music as well. It's easily their most well-written project, in my opinion, as well. The stories are well thought out. They're gripping, they're engaging, they're entertaining for every single story. I've never been like too invested in what the lyrics are on a Black Midi album before, but with this one, it feels like every story kind of fits into a puzzle piece here, and they're just really well written, really engaging, entertaining, and just really satisfying stories. The compositions also do a great job of enhancing the stories. Like if you have a moment where someone's freaking out, the kind of instrumental freak out builds up and it gets louder and more manic. It emphasizes certain words and certain themes. So I think they did a really good job of kind of emphasizing and accenting the stories as well. I just realized I did this like 20 times in that sentence. So yeah, overall, I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to top Cavalcade, but I think they did it. I think they did it. This is Black Midi's best album yet. Now I'm gonna give my Anthony Fantano moment here. I'm feeling a light 9. To be more specific, a 9.2 out of 10. I am gonna have my track rating somewhere in the video as well, I think, so you can kind of see how much I enjoyed each track. My favorite tracks were definitely Sugar/Zoo, Eat Man Eat, Welcome to Hell, The Race is About to Begin, and The Defense. If I had to choose a least favorite track, it would either be Hellfire or Still. They're still fantastic. I just think they're probably the weakest cuts on this album. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Black Midi's new album, their 3rd album, Hellfire. It's their most ambitious to date. I just showed my... You guys just got my legs. You got the leg cam in the video. I think it's their most ambitious album to date, and I think they pulled it off really well. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this album below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Where do you rate it within the Black Midi discography? Like I said, I think it's their best. That's going to do it. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I love Black Midi. These boys are geniuses. All right, peace out.